you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, welcome here at Legacy. I must tell you, we meet fantastic people on this channel. And today I'm very proud to introduce somebody here. It is Lieutenant Colonel or Commandant Stanley F. Botten. Now the Colonel was the second in command of 2 Recce, just under Savvy van der Spy. He was also a Hunter Group member, number 123, and he was the training officer at the Hunter Group. Many of you will know this, but the Hunter Group is from where Special Forces came. It was a citizen force initiative. They decided they want to train themselves into specialist warfare, and they did. And the Colonel was one of those men. He's also an author. He wrote several books. We will give you the links, and we will definitely talk to him about his books as well. And then lastly, he was also the ops officer on Operation Firewood. Now, a while ago, we had a 2 Recce perspective on Ops Firewood. He had lots of comments. And he also had a lot of comments. He also has something to say about firewood and the planning of firewood and what happened.
If we're recording, I would first of all, to introduce, I would actually like to acknowledge my Father in heaven for keeping me and leading me and providing me with the protection that he did. And in my book, I mentioned how I have an article I published called Flight to Freedom, which was published in a book about how I came to America. And in '92, when the 2 Recce was disbanded in March of '92, and it was on the weekend, and that Wednesday, I attempted to leave South Africa because the rumor was that our names were on the hit list with ANC. And also, the major reason I wanted to leave was that I saw what was happening in Zimbabwe and felt that South Africa was going to go the same way. And I haven't been wrong in that assumption. And felt at the age of 52, I had about, I reckoned, about 10 years economic service. And it was better for me to go and make a new life, which I did in America. But the first time I tried to leave South Africa, I was arrested at Jan Smuts, then Jan Smuts Airport, under trumped up charges. So they never ever charged me, but they said, oh, they suspect, and they took away my passport and put me on bond, and I was heard by 3 times, but it took me 3 months to prove that all the allegations they had were false. And I'll never forget that on the in July, it was actually, that was in March, and in July, I was able to scrape money together, and I lost everything. My wife, myself, and our clothes on our backs landed in Houston with $300 in our pockets, and I didn't have a job. However, I had contacts in America because I'd done business in America previously, and then I had a multi-entry visa to go to America. And on landing, I landed like on 24th of July, '92 in Houston. And the good Lord was looking after me, because I had one phone call. I made the phone call. We arrived on the Wednesday night, and Thursday I made a phone call. They said, come for an interview with the company. And the Friday they phoned me and said, we're giving you a contract starting on Monday. and they paid 50% of my accommodation and the rental car and things like that. And before the 3 months was up, I was offered a permanent position as vice president of industrial services for an inspection company. And within 21 days had my work permit. And one of the other important things is that it takes you about 7 years to get a green card. I got my green card within 3 months. And that is, I call divine intervention. How he took care of me, and we never looked back since. To today, I've been in America. I became a US citizen in 2006. And you have to have a green card for 5 years before you can apply for US citizenship. And when I applied, within 2 months, I had my US citizenship. So, the good Lord's really been good to us. I sing his praises every Sunday. That's my own personal situation. And we have a lovely home now. And I was awarded a 50-year award for belonging to the American Society of Non-Destructive Testing. That's ASNT. So I'm very happy here in America. We visit South Africa like every second or third year. I still have 2 daughters in South Africa, a son-in-law, and we go and visit them. And my son-in-law has a part ownership of a small game reserve on the edge of the Kruger National Park. And we love to visit there and spend a whole week in the park and taking pictures. And I have 2 books published on wildlife pictures. Every South African has umpteen wildlife pictures, so they don't really go for that book. But the Americans love it. It's been very successful. And I've sold close on to, must be 70, 80 books on my wildlife pictures. The moment they see them, they say, oh, this should be in National Geographic. No, there's too many more professional photographers who can do a better job than I can. Anyway,
yeah,
that's how I came to America. And that's an article I wrote called Flight to Freedom. Now, as far as the hunter training group is concerned, I joined the hunter training group early in 1968. And it was the hunter training group was formed and started by Colonel Gil van Kerkhoven. Now, Gil van Kerkhoven was at that stage commandant, and he was officer commanding of the South African Irish. And Gil, I had an interview with him. I told him that I was busy writing the book We Dare, and we had discussions, and I put some facts down. And he, in the book, he describes how he first attempted to get the hunters recognized, and that was with General Hemster and General Lowe. But at that stage, they were very fast that, South African was a defense force, not an active force per se. And later in 69, we made a movie of the hunter training, which is available on video. So several people have seen that video of the training. That movie was shown at Defense Headquarters. And in that meeting and in the people attending was General Lowe, and there were umpteen colonels and generals and a couple of majors who attended that meeting. And after that, we'd completed showing the movie, one of the majors got up and said, "Oh, I wish I could do that type of training in the army for my people. But at that stage, you may remember, there was a lot of very low key. They wanted to reduce the intensity of military training, because if mommy felt that her son was being badly treated, she spoke to the minister, and result is that the training officers for the infantry and basics and things like that, their hands were tied. They couldn't really do the tough training like the hunter training group was doing. And that was just purely a voluntary group. A lot of people don't understand. You know, Montgomery in the Second World War said that the war is won by the corporals, not by the generals and the brigadiers and the colonels, but by the corporals. And you may recall that at that stage in 68 and prior to that, national service was 9 months. In those 9 months, the infantry soldier was lucky to fire as much as 7 rounds of ammunition. And they were totally inadequately trained. And the national servicemen felt that way. They felt, man, they didn't feel that they were adequate to do it. And when Gil van Kerkhoven did an operation, he found that type of training was lacking in the Irish in an operation he did in the Eastern Province, in the Cape area, in the Cape Province. And he decided to form a group a voluntary group that would do intensive weapons training for the soldier. You know, the training of the hunter group was really aimed up to corporal level, and not making them officers and captains and things like that, because he felt that it was important that a soldier should know his rifle so much it could be like an extension of his arm. And he could actually do, and this is why they did immediate action drills and firefighting drills and immediate formations. And the army actually adopted a couple of the formations that were done instigated by the hunter training group. And that was the Scorpion formation with the 2 scouts up front, head and machine gun in the tail, known as the Scorpion formation. And that's where the Scorpion badge came from. And this is where the guys worked hard, and they, we did our training every Saturday, whereas a lot of people were playing rugby or cricket or tennis or something like that on a Saturday. This group of volunteers was doing military training, and we would say Suffolk City, but they were disciplined and worked hard. Really, by the end of the day, you were pretty exhausted. We were blessed with a civilian who was a guy that was actually very well versed with unconventional warfare, and also unconventional arms combat and things like that. It's happening with Joe Grant Grierson. Now, Joe Grant Grierson did an excellent job in training, and he was like the mentor for the hunter training group. And he came in. We all did voluntary. We weren't paid for it. We did everything voluntary. And we would actually, it was interesting that a lot of regiments sent their young people to a hunter training group. We must have trained all in total during the hunter period, at least 1,000 to 2,000 troops, which they came from different regiments. And when they finished and qualified, which they eventually qualified with the yellow rondel and the black Scorpion, which was approved by the Chief of the Army, And to cut back to that presentation that we did at Defence Headquarters, General Lowe was there, and he stood up and said, "I want a group like that." And that was really the birth of Special Forces. And then General Lutz was given the task to form this group, and Jan Breitenbach was chosen, and they formed the whole group of Special Forces. So really the birth of Special Forces started with that video at Defence Headquarters way back in 68, late 68. At the same time, in 70, meantime, the Hunter Training Group wasn't recognized yet, and we were doing our own thing. And one of the things that I experienced, that I've always been interested in nature and animals and plant life and things like that. I did a walk with a couple of young guys through Zanin area, that area in Eastern Transvaal, and did some research on, used military tactics to maneuver and do survival type work. And then I said to a bunch of our, there was a report came back from the police saying that one of their members had been found dead of thirst, of dehydration, sitting at the base of a baobab tree. And that baobab tree had 400 gallons of water in the base. And he didn't know how to recognize it. One must understand that the South African national servicemen, in the old days, most of them had been on farms and slept under the stars and gone fishing and knew how to live off the bush. That in the days we're talking about now, in the 70s, and 68 and the 70s, 80% of the national service came from cities. They knew where to find a Wendy's or something like that, or a quick Kentucky Fried Chicken, but they didn't know how to live off the land. And they were really, at times, very, I should say, apprehensive of being suddenly in the bush without any support. Now, the official army concept to that was, you mustn't let them know that they're out of line of logistics, that they will always be surprised. But we must realize that a patrol on their own can sometimes get lost, and they're in a foreign environment. They don't know what to do. Now, survival became one of my pet hobbies as far as that was. And in 1972, a group of, we were eight guys, voluntary from the Hunter Training Group, in our own time took a week off at work and drove up to Messina in the Madimbo area, and we started to do survival research. Not survival research, we were actually testing. There was a book published by Colonel Douglas Grange of the Rhodesian Air Force called Don't Die in the Bundu. And we said, okay, let's take this book now. This is now a textbook. Let's prove it. Let's see, does it really work? And we found a lot of shortcomings and a lot of errors in that book. And the joke after that was that they said that Don't Die in the Bundu was a terrorist guide to Rhodesia. And I submitted a report to this about that. It was called Operation Surprise Packet. And we found that there was a lot of things missing. So we felt that there was more research needed. And when I submitted this report to Wood Command, it was forwarded to the Chief of the Army. And it appears at one stage, the Army was very keen to do a survival book and research. And they gave the job to the CSIR. And the CSIR typical doctors, did finite element analysis of the plants and stuff like that. Totally impractical and way above the head of a normal soldier. And one of the guys that was involved, that was a chap named Johannes Farmeyer, who is with the Pretoria Botanical Gardens. And I was introduced to him, and we actually got together and said, well, you know, I'd like to redo that. And we had the birth of what's called Operation Kippersol. Now, Operation Kippersol, we had 12 people do that. Also hunters, training group, volunteers. There was only one civilian that came with, and that was Hannes Farmeyer. But what we did beforehand, we did some plant recognition and training at the Botanical Gardens in Pretoria, because the plants that we need to identify for the road for survival are in the Botanical Gardens in Pretoria. So you can get a real life, and we did that, and we went to the snake park and learned about snakes and things like that. And that led to when we submitted that final report to Chief of the Army, well, actually via Wit Command, because McNally was the colonel in charge at the time at Wit Command that we worked with, and he gave us permission to go and do this in the Madimbo area and to use the Madimbo area for training. And that led to the putting the whole report together. It was a large page report that we put together with photographs of things that we did. And we got a beautiful letter from Chief of the Army congratulating us on the endeavors and saying that this group is phenomenal, that they're doing that sort of research. And from that, Hannes Farmeyer and myself, we were actually asked by the Chief of the Army to do and publish a survival handbook for the South African Army. We did this. The original grey one that came out, it was replaced with a red copy, what they call a red cover copy. The difference between the grey one and the red copy, which came out later, is that the photographs on the plants were bigger. We complained bitterly about the size of the pictures in the grey copy. And it was written all in Afrikaans. So the English guys didn't have much chance to work with that. And so I decided, because I talked to friends and said, well, you know, I was involved in this. And they said, well, won't you translate that book? And this led to the publication of my book, Basic Principles and Methods of Survival in the African Bush. An English version, it's an English translation. A lot of that work is Hannes Farmeyer's work, but we were in the research, and a lot of those pictures, I actually took those pictures of those plants and things like that during the survival research. Well, the hunter training group, the result of that, I was asked to a meeting by then General Ivan Lemmer. Now, General Ivan Lemmer was actually head of the secret section of the army, and he, at that stage, the one recce had been formed already and was in operation. And General Lemmer said, they have a problem because there are national servicemen that are doing services with one recce. And when they finish their term, to place them in an ordinary infantry regiment, these guys have specialized training. They therefore don't fit into it. And we actually found that quite often. I had several times I go and visit a citizen force regiment that a recce guy had been transferred to, and talk them out and say, please, this guy doesn't fit into your organization. Can you transfer him to recce? And Brigadier Ivor Lemmer said, General Ivor Lemmer said, would you be interested in forming a citizen force regiment to take these national servicemen and also provide a quarter reserve backup and stuff like that for special forces? And resulting from that, there was an interview, Major Sabie van der Spey at the time, he was a major, he'd come later to join the Hunter training group because Wood Command had said, well, hey, they didn't want these mercenary type Hunter training group running around doing all things, even though they used us many, many times to like Army Day, they would have us at the Wimmerpan arena, and we would do a demonstration of weapon handling. We'd have people like Willie Ward jumping with a parachute and things like that, and meet action drills. And the Rand Easter Show used us as well for demonstration, and then we made contact. I was working in Kempton, in Edenvale at the time, and a couple of officers from me was, believe it or not, was Sam Bloomberg. And Sam Bloomberg, when we got to meet with Sam Bloomberg, he was in command of the police reserves, and he was head of police reserves, SAP. And he said to me, he said, they're actually busy organizing a Widows and Orphans Fund show, and would the hunters be prepared to come and do a demonstration for them and things like that? And I said, and I spoke to Sabie and said, yes, okay, let's do that. And the police gave us, and we right till the end, we had police camouflage uniform. And that all was given to us. And I've still got some of my police camouflage jacket and things like that was given to us for this show. And it became a standard uniform with the Hunter training group at the time. And it was interesting that the rule came out that you weren't allowed to wear camouflage. The hunters were the only one that were approved to wear camouflage. But prior to us getting the police camouflage, the camouflage, each guy made his own and got a pair of khaki coveralls and painted them and did things like that. So there was a mixed match, and Joe Grantquist and say, he's rubbish. So, but we finally got a uniform. And when we did, we were asked in 74 to go and do a selection course in Oudtshoorn. So the Hunter training group became of age. And this is why the Scorpion is embedded in the Hunter, in the 2 recce badge. It was really sad that in March 92 that they disbanded 2 reconnaissance regiment. I was looking at Facebook the other day at how Colonel Breitenbach was bemoaning the banning of 3-2 battalion. Now, interesting enough, the 2 recce were right in the very beginning in 1975, when to the first call up of 2 recce. Now we have the honor or the privilege of being the first citizen force regiment to be called up for service in Angola. Some other regiments try and claim that, but the thing is, don't forget that 2 recce at that stage was on the secrets list. Nobody knew about Tureki. Tureki wasn't known, but they were the first citizen force unit to go to in December 75. We were stationed in Rundu, and we operated out of Rundu. And we had some interesting things there. The one time they said, okay, we arrived there, and they said to us, don't bring anything. Don't bring your weapons or anything like that. So we arrived in Rundu, and they said, well, where's your stuff? So we haven't got anything. So we had to scrounge and beg, borrow, and steal stuff all over to equip the guys with weapons. And the funny part about it is that they had to do a parachute jump. Now they're going to do an operational parachute jump and they didn't have any parachute helmets for them to use. So they ended up doing a jump with a Cuban helmet. And while they were jumping, the Cuban helmets fell off and made clang, clang, clang all over all over the ground. And also Jan van der Merwe, his rifle because we're supposed to have folding butt rifles. They jumped with ordinary R1s with a wooden butt. And of course, Jan van der Merwe, who later on became Major van der Merwe, Jan van der Merwe broke the stock of his rifle and bent it. And Sabie van der Spey got in the fork of a tree and straightened it out so he could fire at least one shot. Well, while that was going on, a contingent of us, it was about 5 of us that were at Rundu. They wanted us to take a convoy and go with a convoy of gasoline, after and in these trucks, and they actually gave us what we call the Portuguese garden trucks because they were captured during the Angolan campaign, and one big truck that had 44-gallon drums of after. The whole idea was to take this up to what is then Kayundu, and the airport there, get the filling station so that the Air Force could refill the helicopters and the aircraft, etc. And while we were going up on this, we had 2 flats, and we eventually swapped tires between the trucks until we got 4 tires. And going through the border, we were driving along, and of course you got narrow roads as such, and coming around the corner, we had a young permanent force lieutenant that was supposed to be commander of the convoy, was right in the front Unimog. And what happens, they come around the corner, and of course South Africans drive on the left-hand side, they drive on the right-hand side. So the South African swerves the Unimog to the left-hand side like he would do in South Africa, but the Portuguese, there was a Volkswagen Beetle with Portuguese, 4 Portuguese in that were trying to get out and traveling at night, and they, of course, turned left. So there's a head-on collision. And the one Portuguese was killed outright in the operation, in that crash, and 2 were injured. So now we have a Casevac situation. And so at this crash, I said, well, okay, this young second lieutenant was shell-shocked and with a crash and under shock. And so I was forced to take command of the convoy because there was nobody else and said, okay, let's take an all-round defense, do a temporary base, and call for a Casevac. So I said, okay, bring the signal, bring the radio. Now, what had happened is that these young national servicemen that were attached to this convoy, they didn't check the radios before they left. And they arrived here with a radio and a microphone that wouldn't work, so that you couldn't transmit. But fortunately, we had guys that were electronic technicians like Alan Mann. Alan Mann was an electronics technician, and he was able to fix the microphone in the field and get something going. And then we called for a casevac, and they said, oh no, we can't give you a casevac now because the weather and also the security of the operation. So we had to load the body of the Portuguese and the injured guy on the back of a Samuel, and now we drive all the way up to Kaundu. And so that was, and then we arrive outside Kaundu. We can actually see the airport in the distance, and it's a town. You got to drive through the town to get through to Kaundu. And all of it, we see there's mortars going off and firing going off and fighting in the town. And you don't drive a convoy full of AFTA through that. You're looking for trouble. So I reported this, and they said, well, can you get a small group to go to the airport and secure the airport? And that's where Alan Mann and a group of guys. And what was funny to me was we met up with the UNITA. UNITA we're up on the hill overlooking the town. And because I went to the top of the hill to see where this was and to see what was doing and stuff like that. We were very fortunate with the Portuguese guys like myself, like Tony Becker and myself, had been involved in the mining industry in South Africa. And you're in the mining industry, you are taught to speak Fanagalo. And we were able to communicate with the UNITA troops and people like that were up there. But what amused me, that there wasn't the same weapon with everybody. There was a front loader and a 303 and a this and a that, and a guy walking around with an RPG bomb and nothing else, nothing to fire it with. And yeah, it looked like you're looking at a museum of weapons that go right across it. And that's where the army, and I asked him, how much ammunition you got? Oh, they've got 2 rounds. Anyway, so Alan Mann went in, and he was actually fired on we think that was FAPLA or MPLA that were firing on them as they were going through, because Alan Mann and a few of the other recce guys went to go and secure the airport. I didn't go with them because I was now in command of the convoy now, and so I couldn't leave the convoy and sent them over to do this. And they had made a contact, and they were fired on, and Alan Mann reported that they fired, and when they had intensive return fire, the whoever was attacking them, which we think was MPLA, they withdrew because they realized that the fire was too strong for them. And Alan Mann and a guy, Sergeant Williams, Glenn Williams, nicknamed Medic, he was with that group. Now, Medic contracted malaria. He had a malaria case, and he was evacuated from the airport. But when they got to the airport, the Air Force were there already and had carried with C-130 their own AFTA, so the AFTA wasn't necessary at the airport. But we then, they said, okay, we collected the guys, and they did a casevac, removing the wounded Portuguese and the dead Portuguese. And it was interesting in the Casabac that Jonas Savimbi was in the aircraft, and he had this dead body in the aircraft. He wasn't very happy, he's the camper, to have the smell of this guy. He was a high by now. And in Kuvalai, we stopped there, and the helicopters were able to refuel from the convoy. You know, that's also actually that story was published in We Fear Naught But God by Paul Elts. He published that story that I had personal experience. Anyway, I really enjoyed working with Special Forces, the comradeship, and the men we worked with. They were all volunteers and did a fantastic job. They did everything they were called to do. Unfortunately, we think maybe that Operation Firewood, that mess up of that occurred there, that Tureki didn't come out with that with a very good reputation. Although, as ops officer, I think they did a very good job. Okay. Do you have any questions for me?
So you're just fantastic. I'm listening here and I'm really enjoying this. I must tell you. I made a few notes, of course. I just want to take you back slightly. You actually joined the army for your military service in 1962. That's
correct, yes. I volunteered. Originally, you may remember that 62 was shortly after the Sharpeville in 1960, that there was a lot of worry or concerned about security and things like that. Now, I originally in the mechanical engineering business, in the fitter turner machinist. So when the original call-ups came, I wasn't called up, I was exempted because I was involved in engineering. And I was very disappointed about that. And when I had an opportunity, a guy came knocking on my door in 62 from, he was a sergeant with West Park Commando, and said, they're recruiting people, would you be interested? Now, my father has served in the Second World War. He was a warrant officer in the South African Air Force. And I did Boy Scouts as a young man and as a young boy, and ended up as a rover, which is, guys, when you're 17, you can't be a scout anymore, and the next step is a rover. So I became a rover, and so I've always had an interest in the military and interest in that sort of thing. So when I got this opportunity to volunteer, I did so, and that's why today I wear a badge saying that you're a volunteer. So I wasn't called up. I did voluntary work, and we trained hard. West Park Commando at that stage was commanded by Colonel George Duxbury, who was then the director of the Johannesburg War Museum. And we had officers like Ozzie Baker, Commandant Ozzie Baker, who was a British, he jumped at Arnhem. He was a paratrooper during the Second World War. Winter Prevost, Alex Tyrrell, and these were all ex-Second World War officers. And we did a lot of good, hard training. And so I was very proud of them at that stage. And I spoke to someone the other day who was involved when West Park was sent to the border at some stage. and they messed up so bad they ended up having a drunken party and got sent home. So Westbok, the name of Westbok isn't very good these days. But Westbok changed to become Santon Commando. And because I rose up in the rank, I was started as a private in 62, became a corporal less than a year later, and then went on a senior NCO's course at Youngsfield in the Cape and became a sergeant. And I was a sergeant for about a year. And they said, well, we'd like you become a candidate officer. So I did a candidate officer's course at Whit Command in the area that today where the SABC was. That used to be a parade ground years ago. And Westbok Command were stationed there. And we did our course under the control of Captain Levitt, who was then permanent force with Whit Command, who ran the course. We had about 36 students that did the candidate officer course. And I was commissioned in 1968. I joined the Hunters as a CO and was commissioned to a second lieutenant in 68. Did another course a year, 2 years later, it would be called the Larch to Lutz course at Oudtshoorn, which was actually an unconventional tactics course. I was with the Hunters at that stage, and we found that a lot of guys and troops that went and did the Hunter training went back to their regiments and implemented a lot of the training that the Hunters did. So it was a cross-pollination. These youngsters that were training and doing voluntary work with the Hunter training group became NCOs, and some of them even ended up as officers. NCOs, because they were able, these were special people with a special discipline, internal discipline, and a respect for command. So that, and then of course, in 1974, I did a captain's course. I was promoted to captain, and then I did another course at Oudtshoorn, a unit commander's course, and then was promoted to major. And as a major, I did a staff officer's course at Military College as a major, and became a staff officer, and was then afterwards made commandant. So, and at that stage I was, right from the beginning of the formation of Turiki, I was the second in charge. There was, initially was Major Sabi and myself, and Lieutenant Les Grelen, who was passed away. Those were the only three officers at that stage. A lot of the original Hunter training group didn't come across to Turiki. They really had allegiance to their own regiments and went back to their regiments rather than doing the Hunter training. So that's pretty much my story.
Oh, no, sir, it's not. I have such a lot of questions, I assure you. And I want to say to everyone listening here, we are going to speak to the Colonel about his books as well. I booked it. We've got it. And you are expected to get hold of those books, because I really want to read them. But the Hunter groups is a citizens force unit, almost like a private initiative. Am I saying that correctly?
Well, it's a citizen force. They all came from the citizen force and commandos. There were no permanent force instructors or anything like that. They were all citizen force volunteers who felt that they needed better training to do a better job. So, yeah, that's where the hunter training group came from. There were no civilians. I correct that. There was one civilian that actually, he became a Tureki member, Brian Walls. He originally, and because you had to have an army number, we created a number for him with his date of birth. And Brian Walls became a member of two reconnaissance regiment.
It's fascinating to me that we have you. I think I can call you the most senior officer left of two Rekkie, because Colonel van der Spy is not with us anymore. Right. May you rest in peace, sir. And you're also one of two survivors of a hunter group, officer trainers as well.
Well, actually, I'm the only officer surviving a hunter training group. The other person that survived, still alive, is Douglas Pockley, who's in I think he's in Sasolburg or Vereeniging. That's where he is. And but his higher ranker was he was a corporal. That's all. His nickname was Mouse. If anybody knows hunters, they know who Mouse is. Tell you one of the interesting that the hunters got involved with. Oh, they were, every now and again they'd get into trouble. At one time they went to a hotel in Hillbrow after parade, and they were still in uniform, and they were sitting in the lounge, and the waiter said they don't serve soldiers in Hillbrow. And they said, "What? We're defending the country and you don't want to serve us? Call the manager." And the manager, and there was a scuffle, and the manager got knocked down, and the police were called, and the police came and took these guys off, and they said, well, you know, they had to go, they had to take them away for their own safety's sake, and to calm the civilians down. And it was showing the police some of the moves that they have and unarmed combat stuff. But we had a fairly close liaison with the police afterwards. In actual fact, one Friday night, the squad car was quite a thing, and one Friday night, a bunch of us went with the squad cars and rode with the squad cars while they were doing things. And in actual fact, I bear a scar on my knuckles today when an African that we were arresting struck out, and of course I flattened him. So he'd pulled a knife and wanted to. Well, we had good training. Joe Grant-Grierson trained us well.
It's fascinating, sir, because I was in the squad cars. I was in a Pretoria flying squad most of my career. And we had the Scorpion as our insignia, which is fascinating because I know that you were involved with the creation of a special task force of the police, who's also special forces rated. Yeah. Can you tell us about that?
Well, actually, it was interesting. It all started around this Sam Bloomberg and this demonstration and stuff like that. That we made contact, and I was asked to visit, and I visited Blackie de Swart, who is at police headquarters in Pretoria, and we talked about this and what we do and stuff like that. And he said, well, they'd like to form a group like that. And they actually, there was outside Pretoria, there was a training area that the police used, more towards, I'm just trying to remember the name of the area. we did some training out there at, with the, as guests of the SAP, were with us, and there were a couple of us, and Joe Grant-Grierson had us going through streams and fire movement and all that sort of stuff. And the police then sent a group of guys, I think there were about 4 of them, to one Saturday afternoon. They pitched up and wanted to see what we were doing. And their reasoning, they told me, was that they felt inadequate. They were doing border duty, and they felt that they were one time they're in the streets of Johannesburg, and next thing they're in the bush carrying a rifle. And one fiasco, for example, was there were a couple of priests that were captured by a Zambian or Zimbabwean, weren't Zimbabwean, it was Zambian, because they were swimming in the river and they'd left their rifles, and the terrorists actually captured them. So it was, and then another case where a guy reported that he just did a spot check on one of the police on patrol, and said, well, let's just check your right. And the machine gun, he'd taken the breech block out. He said, why'd you do it? Oh, he said, it's too heavy. So, it was inadequate training. Then they said, well, look, we would like to implement that. And that was the birth of Takmach. And Joe Grant-Grierson went and helped them and did some similar training like he did with the Hunter Training Group. He started doing with the police as well. And resulting of that, and also when I was doing survival research, we were actually communicating, and I had a visit with there was, I think it's out Crosscorp, something like that, that they had a pre-training. They learned that they now want to take the police that are going to do border training. They're going to do a special training camp outside Pretoria, actually towards Loskop Dam, out that way. And they did training there, and we communicated, and Takmach came with that. It was interesting. One of the reports I had, and that was, I was told by one of the Takmach guys that the R4 rifle was used for the first time in Silverton. In Silverton, there was a bank holdup, and they used R4s for the first time and saw the impact. An interesting story about the choice of the R4. We were at Fort Doppies at the time doing training and stuff like that. And one of the CSIR guys came to us and said he wants to do some testing. They had developed a means of checking what they call the energy transfer from of the different types of rounds. And we had the 7.62 long, the 7.62 short, and we had the 5.56 or the 2.23, which really is the 5.56. And we tested this, and I actually fired the rifle, and we did 7.62. What they do is they have clay tiles that are 1 inch thick. There's 6 of them that are like 1 inch apart in a box, and you fire, and what they do then is they measure the diameter and the penetration for the energy transfer. And it found out that the 7.62 long had an energy transfer of 180 foot-pounds, but penetrated 6 tiles. So the high penetration. The 7.62 short, that's the AK-47 round, went through 4 tiles and had an energy transfer of 140 foot-pounds. The 556 went through one tile, and it's split up so much that there wasn't a piece of the projectile left bigger than 1/16 of an inch. And the energy transfer was 400 foot-pounds on the 556. And the guy from the CSIR was telling me how this is why they decided to chamber the R4, because the R4 is an exact copy of the Israeli Galil. The only difference between the Israeli Galil and the R4 is the caliber of the round. And the Galil is an exact copy of the AK-47. And in actual fact, we proved it. We could interchange the breech block. The parts were interchangeable. And so it was rather interesting that this test was done and to see how that worked. One of the two recce guys was doing training and engineering and things like that. And he developed, you may remember, there was a grenade launcher, a 49mm grenade launcher, the short snub-nosed grenade launcher. He developed one that was like a Tommy gun, that had 6 of those grenades that fitted in and could fire. He developed that. It was really, Bellingham was his name, was the guy that did the development of that and proved it. Sabi at that stage had, from a civilian company that he worked for, went and was invited to form a company called EMLC. Now, EMLC was specially made for designing and manufacturing the funnies that special forces used. And tell you a story about one of the guys that he came for pre-selection. He went through me with a pre-selection. We used to do a pre-selection so that when they go on the selection course, they had a chance of winning, of succeeding. They said it was unreal because we had them for like 4 weeks before, 4 weekends before they would go for the selection course. And when we sorted, the guys sorted themselves out. You'll find that the guy couldn't handle it, he just walked away. He didn't come back. Those that went, we had 100% pass on the selection course. And amongst that group was a guy by the name of Gus Davidson. Now, Gus Davidson, I never forget. He was originally with the maintenance with the Blue Beret. And when he completed the selection course, he came with his burgundy beret, and we were in the lecture room, and it was the blackboard, and he took his blue beret and rubbed it for her. He used it to erase all the chalk off the board. That same Gus Davidson, after doing minor tactics, joined one recce permanently. He went to permanent force for a while. And an experience he told me about, that he was in patrol in Rhodesia. They were in Rhodesia with helping the Rhodesian Special SAS. And he was on patrol going through, and a RPG rocket landed between his legs. And it was just a dull silence. It didn't go off because the terrorists had forgotten to remove the fuse, the safety fuse. Gus today is in the UK, lives in the UK. That same Gus Davidson, when he went for his parachute training course, went there and he arrived on the Thursday, I think it was, and he did the course and passed all the tests, because the recce guys had to pass every parachute test before they could qualify. And so Gus did this, and then the following day, a couple of guys from one recce were being sent to go through the same course. So Gus volunteered to do it again. He did the test the second time. And they said, what are you doing it twice? You didn't have to try. Oh, I want to be with the boys. Same Gus Davidson.
But you did the parachute course yourself, sir.
I did skydiving. I did parachute course with Chris Moorcroft, but it was a civilian jumping. It was then Vereniging Skydiving Club. So I did 10 jumps and did training under Chris Moorcroft. I had a problem. I went on for the testing for the parachute course, but ended up with a medical problem. And so I wasn't able to complete that. So I'm still, you'll see, I still have the Hunter training group, Hunter wings I wore on my tunic, and did an air supply course as well. They said, well, we want you to at least have something. So we went and did an air supply course with, and ended up as the team leader for the whole course, and came first in the course, air supply. With interesting things, you have to learn to pack a airdrop crate, and they put in the center, they put an egg, and when they drop, that egg mustn't break, and you were actually dropping this out of the Dakota. I've got some pictures somewhere on photographs of how the Dakota was, and one of the incidents on the course was they were using a cheaper form of parachute to drop stuff and push it out of and you'd have a safety harness, and you'd actually dispatch the stuff out the side of the aircraft, dropping it to the crew down the bottom. And the one guy pushed this out, and the parachute came down and hooked on the tail of the aircraft. So now this guy was flying this with the parachute dragging behind, and eventually got down safely. But that's a sort of real experiences that we had.
I wonder if I can ask you, sir, about firewood. Just to clarify, if you can just give us a background on what actually happened at the top command. Greg Ashton and mates did tell us what happened from 2 Recce side.
Yeah.
But you were the ops officer there as well, so you actually knew how that operation was planned.
Okay, the 2 Recce was called up to form a group. There were 26 2 Recce members, and to go to Onjiva and to meet up and to form a fighting group that included 20 guys from one parachute battalion, and 10 5 Recce guys under the command of Colonel James Hill, and a couple of other, and then also my one that I had the highest respect for, and that is Sergeant Major Moorcroft. Of course, Moorcroft to me is one of the finest soldiers I've ever met. And the plan was that 101 would actually provide a cut-off force, and 101 was part of the Southwest African troops, was 101. And they were fitted with Caspers and stuff like that. And the 5 Recce guys, they had a Casper, and they were trying to find Caspers so the 2 Recce guys should go in the Caspers. And the plan was that they would have a conventional force of armored cars, artillery, and infantry that were going on the west side of the target. As such, they'd actually identified an ANC training camp in Angola that was being used every year to train the ANC terrorists. So they were the diversionary force. They left earlier going up the west side and did attacked several towns and took over towns, and then moved up to actually create as a diversional force. In the meantime, the Special Forces group, and that included the 81mm rifles that were being used in that operation. They moved up on the east side, and with a rear echelon base that was under command of Harry Botha, the late Harry Botha, and they moved in using navigation, GPS navigation, for one of the first times, and also the first time using a DET radios. And those DET radios, before, you'd have what they call a hopper, and that would actually jump frequencies. Now the DET is a smaller unit. It's only about the size, it's about a 4-inch by 6-inch by 2 inches. This is where you actually pre-program your message, type it in, and then you press a button and it transmits so fast that nobody can trace it. And that it was being used there in that operation for the first time. Now the conventional forces, the first village town that they hit, they didn't have much opposition at all, and they wanted to make sure they could get planning of this. So they left a couple of engineers, sappers, behind to map out the town, and so they could get a map of it. And during the time when they were the conventional forces were moving up, and during that time they were measuring, we got an alert that there were MiGs flying over and MiGs going to attack. We got the messages to the Special Forces and to the conventional forces, and the conventional forces didn't have radio communication with the engineers in that town that they'd left behind. And these guys heard an aircraft flying over and thought that it was South African forces. And they really, a couple of them climbed up a water tower to get a better view of where and result is those MiGs attacked them and started strafing them. They jumped from the top of the water tower, and 2 of them had broken legs as a result of that, purely because of lack of communication between the main group and the support group that they'd left behind them. The next operation, they went in and hit a town, and where they had a lot of action there, and the plan was to have a barrage of artillery, and then followed by armored car with infantry as cutoff group. And I remember very clearly telling the commander at the time, because we had a sit rep every morning, and I talked to them and as the ops officer, and said, please make sure that your troops, your infantry, are not in the line of fire before you fire the artillery. He didn't listen. He didn't, I was a citizen force commandant, and he's a permanent force, and what is this Saturday soldier know? He didn't even listen to it. And result is, the first salvo, he killed 4 of his own people, infantry. Also, at the same time, there were impalas being used to strafe the town, and there was one captain, Air Force captain, and what they would do is they'd strafe, come back, change aircraft. They'd have another aircraft ready for him, and he would take off and do the job again. We think that he forgot to set the altimeter on the second aircraft, and he flew it into the ground and was killed. And that was the casualty they had there. It was interesting. After the attack operation and after firewood was completed with the special forces inside, myself, he was in Brigadier Jake Swartz, which was in charge of Sector 10, and there was another commandant as well that we flew a helicopter in and spoke to the conventional force commander, and sorted things out. One of the things that I was a little bit upset about, and we had a to-do about it, was when you have troops in service, in going, it's important to have all their details, their next of kin, contact of next of kin, their correct phone name number, and everything like that. And I had a situation where 101 had several people killed, and there were 2 Dupreas in that, and they hadn't, the special forces guys or the recce guys had given me all the data. I knew exactly who was who, and even the parachute battalion knew his name, rank, number, who, everybody correct, but 101 didn't. And now you had 2 guys with the same name. One of them was killed and the other one not. Now, so I said, look, I cannot report somebody dead when it may be the wrong one. And the other ops officer, the permanent force officer, he jumped all over me. Why are you, for insurance purposes and that sort of thing? And I said, we haven't got their details. And I went up in front of Brigadier Jake Swart, and I said to him, this is the situation. And Brigadier Jake Swart said, don't worry about it, I'll sort it out. But the debrief after firewood is when we had a debrief, and we had the Air Force there and the Army and everybody there. And that's where we realized the Air Force then admitted that they'd actually strafed that the day before, 2 days before. So it came out in the debrief. So there was no surprise like there should have been. Once you lose an element of surprise, they are ready for you. And that's basically why. And 101 drove into an ambush and aggression. And I actually listened to, they recorded everything in real time. There was a group, I think they call themselves EWR, that were actually recording battles in detail and actions. And I listened to the recording of the troops inside that Casper that was being attacked and was burnt out by the terrorists in an ambush for 101. They were climbing over the side, and they said they've never seen such aggression. So, and the Rifle 81mm Rifle, they had an incident where they were firing mortars, okay? Now, the mortars, the distance that they were firing meant that they didn't need a big charge for the mortar to send it up the pipe. And they were discarding it and left it on the floor. And one of these caught alight and burnt out the 81mm mortar rifle. Burnt out because they didn't clear the decks of the charges.
Yeah, things went wrong there, sir, with the booster charges. I understand it was lying there and probably a flash.
Yeah.
Things happen. Things happen.
Yeah.
If you look back now, sir, would you say Would you say that the hunter group were a special breed of men?
I would say so, yes. You get people that are have the ability, and there's only one word for it, have the phosphate capacity. Still, I haven't found an English word to match and express what phosphate is. The ability to stay in power, to stay with it, and to work hard, and to want to improve themselves in their abilities. If you want to become a good hunter, I'm not talking about a hunter military-wise, but a hunter of animals, you're not going to take a rifle out for the first time. You're going to go to the range, you're going to fire it in, and get used to it, and know how it works. And when you're going to have a jam or a stirring, as they say, because I'm typical South African, I know some of the words mean more. And so you need to know your weapon, and you don't want to. One of the things that we emphasized a lot on was that you should be able to strip and assemble your weapon, especially like with the R1 the R1 we were using at the time, and strip it down and reassemble it blindfolded in 90 seconds. What is the reason for that? Because you can have a story, and you can have a problem at night where you don't have lights to see. So you've got to know what you've got to do, and you must be able to feel and know your weapon, and know what its capabilities are.
May I ask you, sir, I want to mention 3 different conflicts. The Malayan troubles they had,
Yes.
Vietnam, and Rhodesia. Would you say, sir, these 3 conflicts perhaps played a role with a hunter group?
To a degree, yes. I even studied the Malayan conflict, and also studied Che Guevara's book, Guerrilla Warfare by Che Guevara. And I was visiting in London, and I picked up the famous Red Book, the communist book at Hyde Park Corner. I purchased one and gave it to headquarters so they would have a copy of what that Red Book was all about. And what's very important is winning the hearts and minds of the people. If you haven't got the people with you, you've got a problem. And so really, we were disciplined, a fighting force, but at the same time, clear thinking. They found that even the Special Forces soldier, it's 20% physical and 80% mental. The mental ability, the staying power, the phosphate power that a guy has to finish the task and not give up halfway, to finish it. It's like anything in life. When you start something, you must finish it. And that's where the unique people is somebody that takes a task and he pushes it through and finishes it right to the end.
Do you think, sir, that being an engineer by training assisted you with your operations?
To a certain degree, yes. It gave me a better understanding of the mechanics and also the planning. Let me tell you something that military gave me. When I volunteered and joined West Park Commando, I was a very shy introvert, couldn't say boo to a goose. They took me and taught me and said, hey, you now are going to stand up and prepare a lecture and do a lecture on this subject. like section leading or something like that. And for the first time, I was now in front of people having to talk and to express and bring message across to other people. That and the staff course I had in the staff course, and I still use it today, to make an appreciation. You get a short appreciation and a detailed appreciation. In staff office, of course, you do a detailed appreciation where you go through step by step by step. I apply that still in my civilian capacity. I plan it. And you learn to do that in special forces, in Recce and Hunter. We learned that with your kit, you knew how to know where everything was in and where you put it, so to put it back in the same place. So you didn't have to unpack the whole thing to find something that you want, because you knew your kit, you knew your weapons. So, you know, that's really very important in everyday life.
I was about to ask you about that, sir. You're a man now of advanced age. You look very good for your age, I must tell you.
Thank you.
Do you have, sir, any advice for a youngster or somebody listening here?
I would say the important thing is that when you identify what you want to do, you should plan a career with one thing in mind. You work for 75% of your life. If you're not happy in your work, your life's a misery. So it's very important to choose a career and to go for it in all out, give it everything you've got, so that you're happy with your work and you become a professional at your work. And what's also very important is ethics. The ethics of life. When you say something, people must know that you're speaking the truth, that you believe in what you're doing, and that you're doing to the best of your ability. Don't rely on other people to do it for you. Do it yourself. If you want, there's an old adage my father taught me, says, if you want a job done properly, do it yourself. And really, you need to do it. You need to have pride in workmanship, pride in what you do, pride in your planning. And that's, I actually left the engineering machine shop work, because I was basically an apprentice, started as an apprentice fitter turned a machinist. I left the engineering trade because of the lack of pride in workmanship. I'm sorry, when I do something, I want to be proud that I've done it and have pride in your workmanship. That applies in every walk of life. What you do, you must be proud to do it. You must be proud of what you're doing, not just willy-nilly and, oh, it doesn't matter. It does matter.
You will send me the links for your books, sir, because I'll put them in the description also here.
Okay, it's at Amazon.com, Lieutenant Colonel Stanley F. Botten. Amazon.com. It's available in Kindle now as well. The We Dare books in Kindle, and the survival book is on Kindle. A lot of people these days want an electronic copy. That's why I put it on to Kindle. And also, it doesn't cost much. It's much cheaper, and it's something you can read on your book and things like that, in your computer or whatever you're using.
Yes, so, we would love to read that, I can tell you. And we're going to have, definitely we're going to have another episode or two to speak about your hobbies as well as your books, and perhaps about your faith as well, sir. That is always fantastic for me to see that. And I must thank you for your time here. I know it's Early morning in Texas, late afternoon.
It's not so bad. It's only 9:30.
Only 9:30. You've got a full day of work ahead of you, sir.
Yeah,
And I
that's
want
right.
to thank you. Thank you for coming here, sir. Thank you for the show. And to the rest of you listening here, I just want to tell you, just contact me. Let me know if you want to talk to me. I found out about the Colonel. We got hold of him within a few hours, and here we are. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and to God be the glory.
Absolutely, sir. Amen.